AIR. AIR is a cross-platform runtime system which allows deploying applications to the desktop using web technologies such as Flash, Flex, HTML, JavaScript, and also PDF. I've instrumented AIR in this experimental version that's not shipping with dtrace probes, and I'd like to show you some of that.
Just by way of background, Brendan and I went down to Adobe and tried to convince them to do something like this, and about halfway through our presentation, Michael was already most of the way done with it. So either we were pretty convincing, or he had already done something.
dtrace was an easy sell for me.
Yeah. Theo brings back memories of Wes at OSCON doing PHP. Same thing. I was halfway through my presentation, and he'd done half of the PHP provided.
So the probes that I have are in the ActionScript virtual machine, which is the virtual machine that we use to run the ActionScript language behind Flash. AVM is also known as Tamarin, and that's included in the Mozilla project now. There's work underway to include that in the Firefox browser. The AVM is an open source virtual machine. So I've instrumented AVM with some probes for function entry, function return, various garbage collection operations, and using these, I have a couple of scripts that I've stolen from Brendan's DTK, his JavaScript work, and
I was going to say Control-C to end. I was going to say starting tracing, Control-C to end. That's how we know it's script.
Yeah. So this is an AIR application called Snitter, which is a Twitter client. There's a lot of a lot of the early AIR applications are basically adaptations of common web applications such as Twitter, Pounce, and RSS aggregators and whatnot to the desktop. And this is a pretty good example of a program that does some ActionScript, some JavaScript, some web integration. And here's a display of the time spent in each function call in ActionScript, and you can see as I do things that involve more of this HTML work, there's the function profiles change, and we can see exactly what's going on at the ActionScript method dispatch level. I don't have visibility into the JavaScript side of things. Those are, the object models are fully bridged, but between ActionScript and JavaScript in AIR, but I don't have visibility into the JavaScript side yet.
Is that a thing where you could use Brendan's provider and/or a Tamarin provider when it's available to bridge that? I mean,
so the only difficulty would be integrating into KJS. Brendan's work was done into SpiderMonkey,
right?
And I simply haven't gotten around to instrumenting KJS.
So KJS, I don't know.
It's the WebKit,
okay.
Apple's WebKit, which is used in Safari as well. We use that in AIR to do HTML. So if KJS were instrumented as well, then we could have full instrumentation into JavaScript as well as ActionScript. But regardless, I do have pretty good visibility into this. I can track how long various function calls take and how often I'm getting various events. Most of our developers aren't going to have too much need for determining the system calls. We, of course, when developing AIR, we like to have that kind of visibility into the full state of the system. But most of our developers who are using AIR to develop their applications are going to be more interested in what's the state of the AIR runtime. And only occasionally, I expect, we'll want to delve into what the full state of the system is. But nevertheless, having that available is a very powerful resource. So this is, of course, a modification of Simon's flow time script. And then I can also show another script that will say what are the tracing size classes of allocations that are being made here. And it becomes very clear fairly quickly that this 88 byte size class is a very common allocation. If this application were a bit more active, one might delve into that a bit more.
And do you have sufficient infrastructure in the provider to be able to delve into that?
I do. Yes.
Cool.
But I don't exactly. So one thing that would be handy, which I haven't done yet, is a UStack operator for ActionScript.
Oh boy.
That's, yeah.
So UStack helpers are so just for those who are unaware, we made reference to this morning, but UStack helper is what allows you to get with the application, the VM participation, a full stack backtrace. And the reason that that's important, that has to be in the kernel context. The reason you want to do that in kernel context is because you want to be able to correlate events like being taken off the CPU, doing I/O, with what's going on in your hardware. Well, that's tough, and hopefully, if you've got some control over the VM, here's what you need to know is you need to have that information lying around effectively. You need to be able to, and some runtimes just discard the information. And like in Perl, for example, a UStack helper, as Perl is written today, a UStack helper is impossible because Perl chucks the information. It's just gone. It doesn't know it. And of course, Perl's undebuggable for not unrelated reasons. But so if you got control over the runtime, that's the kind of thing. If you've got that information lying around. I mean, they're very hard to develop. And John, I think to John, you and I and Tom Rodriguez from the Java team are the only 3 people in the world to develop UStack helpers. If you can develop it, it would be incredibly powerful.
I have a question. How does the information you get using your provider compare to other debuggers for AIR and other debuggers for AIR?
There are other debug systems for AIR. So the most commonly used one is FDB, which is the Flex debugger, or Flash debugger that connects to AIR. It is most commonly used from the development environment, the Flex Builder, which is based on Eclipse, and that allows the user to step through code line by line, and it is sort of a micro level debugger, analogous to GDB. dtrace comes in at the macro level and allows us to drill down to the point where it would start to make sense to look at things in FDB. But starting out with FDB is not necessarily the best approach when you don't know what question to ask.
A long time ago, a friend of mine who worked on OpenGL told me about a debugger or a system they had where you could sort of, you could kind of click on an object in their, your 3D viewport and then actually see events or stop when that object was updated or so on. I wonder if you've thought at all about that, being able to sort of say, trace events related to this button, say.
I hadn't, but that's an interesting idea.
I just didn't know how connected your software stack is. It's such that you'd be able to kind of do that.
Yeah, I think it would be possible to do so. I don't know. It's something that would be worth considering.
It might not be helpful. I mean, it may not actually solve real problems. I don't know. But.
So, one question for you, and I don't know enough about Flex or ActionScript to know, but it's similar to JavaScript, is it not, in terms of its
absolutely.
JavaScript driven.
ECMAScript based.
You can actually say ECMAScript with a straight face. I'm impressed. I always thought it sounded like a skin disorder. One of the big problems you got with JavaScript is anonymous functions, because functions are first class. Do you have the same problem in AIR, and do you have the ability to actually indicate what data member a function is?
We do have the problem of dealing with anonymous functions in AIR right now. They do show up as just a no name function. There is support within the ActionScript virtual machine for dealing with source code information, the source line and file name. I have not integrated that into.
So a paradigm that I think we're moving to in environments like this that Brendan did on JavaScript is using is-enabled probes to gather arguments. So you have an is-enabled probe around the function, and then you also have an additional is-enabled probe that if I enable mumble-mumble-args or whatever, where you're going to do something even more invasive. And that may be in your VM where you're figuring out, you're doing all the debug information to figure out what source line it corresponds to. And I mean, Brendan, I think that may become a paradigm for other providers to follow as well.
Yeah, that's definitely of interest, and I don't have that.
Cool. That's great, though, it's possible.
That's all I have.
Great.